Hi everyone, so this is a quick tutorial on how to look up a code in an ICD-10 manual. The manual that I use for the courses that I teach are the Optum manuals. I really like these manuals because they are color-coded and I think it makes it a little bit easier. But you can do this in any ICD-10 manual that you have. So the manual that I'm using today is the 2017 ICD-10-CM Expert for Physicians. You can see that I have my manual all tabbed out along the top, and then as well as, I've got paper clips falling out everywhere here, as well as along the sides to make it easier for myself to find codes after I find them in the index. I have a whole nother video on how I tab out my manuals floating around somewhere on YouTube, so you can look for that if you like. If you are in my classes, it is probably the video that is linked directly above or below this video in your online course outline. You can set up your manual however you want. It's just I have found that tabbing out the edges especially makes looking up codes quite a bit easier in the long run, a little bit more efficient. Okay, so for this quick tutorial, let's look up a code for a woman who has developed anemia from chronic menstrual issues. So we have a lady and she's having chronic menstrual issues, and she has, as such, as a result of her chronic bleeding and menstrual cycles, she has developed anemia. So let's start. You will always start with the index. The first thing you're going to do for every single code is look up the code in the index first. You will then refer back to the tabular list. So the index for the ICD-10 is found at the front of the book. You have all of your guidelines and other things up front, and then we go flip to the index portion. So obviously A is first. We're going to look for anemia. And if you happen to have the same manual that I do, anemia starts on page 18 of the index. So then what you're going to do, let me flip this around for you. What you'll do is begin with all of your anemias and look for the one that is most like the specific type of anemia that you are trying to code. And you find that information in the medical record or in the patient's chart. So in this patient's chart, it says that she has chronic bleeding, and her anemia is due to this chronic bleeding. Okay? So you will go back down through your lists, and right here, let me move this down for you. Okay, I paused it for just a minute and refocused the camera there. So here we have anemia. These are all of our types of anemia. Anemia starts a little bit up here where you can't see out of the view of the camera. But these are all of our types of anemia, and they go on for a couple of pages. There's a lot of different things that we can use to code anemia. But we want to look for anemia that is due to chronic blood loss. So if we go down here, here's chronic. And then we have blood loss, which is D50.0. Okay? Now, even if you weren't sure if that meant chronic anemia or if it meant chronic blood loss, we can go over and keep looking and scanning all of our rows. And if you actually end up flipping the page, if we flip the page over on the next rows, several rows of anemia, if we look for iron deficiency, which is secondary to chronic blood loss, we again see the code D50.0. So D50.0 seems like the logical place to start when we are flipping back into the tabular list. So in order to flip to the tabular list, I flip my book on the edge, and then I start to read my labels. I see here is D50 to D89, and that is in Chapter 3, Diseases of the Blood and Blood-Forming Organs. So I'm going to open my manual up to D50.0. So I have the manual flipped over and have located the code D50. So D50 covers iron deficiency anemia, and then you need to make sure that you're paying close attention to your includes and excludes notes. So this D50 code includes acidotic anemia and hypochromic anemia. And then if we are looking for D50.0, which is the one that our index directed us to, that is iron deficiency anemia secondary to chronic blood loss. It could also be post-hemorrhagic anemia. And then, again, we need to pay attention to these includes and excludes notes. So excludes states that acute post-hemorrhagic anemia and congenital anemia from fetal blood loss are not included in this D50.0 code. Now, I didn't mention either of those two factors, so it looks like this D50.0 code is going to be a good code for us to use for a woman who is suffering from anemia due to chronic blood loss. And so that would be what we would code then. That's our code selection. Okay, so that is your basic process for looking up codes. You're going to want to always start in the index and then make sure that you get in the habit right away when you're learning to code of double checking those codes from the index in the tabular list. One other important note is to make sure that you have read your conventions and your guidelines so that you understand what the abbreviations mean and what the includes and excludes notes mean. Things like that are important. Now, the nice thing about this manual that I use is that typically on the bottom of the pages there will be little let me show you this one. So there will be little icons like the character. The additional character required is the check mark, the placeholder alert, manifestation codes, unspecified. Those things are all usually down on the bottom of the page. So if it's a code that is used, if you're using these Optum manuals, if there is a notation somewhere in the tabular list that is used, then you can find what that notation means, typically at the bottom of the page, and that will help direct you to making sure that you are selecting the most specific code possible. Alright, so that's it. That's all I have for you guys. I look forward to having you all throughout the semester, and we will talk soon. Thanks, guys.